Imagine this, you're walking down a street, minding your own business, when suddenly you feel a strong urge to buy a certain brand of soda. You didn't even think you were thirsty. What's going on? It might not just be your parched throat talking, it could be something a bit more sinister. Welcome to the world of dark manipulation tactics, where people are persuaded, nudged, and sometimes outright tricked into doing things they might never have thought of on their own. Manipulation isn't always as obvious as a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Sometimes it's sneaky, subtle, and can even be mistaken for something as innocent as a friendly suggestion. But make no mistake, some of these tactics can be quite dark, and understanding them is the first step to avoiding their trap. The power of authority, Milgram's shocking experiment. Let's start with one of the most famous and chilling examples of manipulation, the Milgram experiment. In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram wanted to see just how far people would go in obeying an authority figure. Here's how it worked. Participants were told they were part of a study on learning and memory. They were instructed to ask another participant, who was actually an actor, questions and deliver electric shocks for every wrong answer. The shocks increased in intensity with each mistake, from mild jolts to dangerous levels. Now here's the twist. The shocks weren't real, but the participants didn't know that. What's terrifying is that most of them kept administering shocks, even when the actor pretended to scream in pain, just because a person in a lab coat told them to. This experiment showed how easily people can be manipulated into doing harmful things when they believe they're just following orders. Foot in the door technique, starting small, ending big. Ever been asked for a small favor, only to find yourself roped into something much bigger? This is called the foot in the door technique. It's a classic manipulation tactic that works by getting someone to agree to a small request first, then gradually escalating to something larger. Imagine your friend asks you to watch their dog for an hour. No big deal, right? But after you agree, they casually mention they'll be out of town for the weekend. Suddenly, that 1 hour favor turns into a full-on dog-sitting gig. This tactic preys on our desire to stay consistent. Once we've said yes to something small, we're more likely to agree to something bigger. The scarcity principle. Act now, think later. You've seen those infomercials, limited time offer. Only 5 left in stock. This is the scarcity principle at work. The idea here is simple. When something seems rare or in short supply, we're more likely to want it, even if we don't really need it. This tactic taps into our fear of missing out, FOMO. We don't want to lose out on something potentially great, so we act quickly, often without thinking it through. It's a tactic used in sales all the time, but it can also show up in personal relationships or negotiations. For example, a person might say, "This is a one-time offer, so you better decide now," pressuring someone into making a hasty decision. Social proof. Everyone's doing it. Ever been swayed by the idea that everyone else is doing it? That's social proof in action. People tend to follow the crowd, especially in situations where they're unsure of what to do. This can be harmless, like picking a restaurant because it's packed with customers, but it can also be used to manipulate people into making bad choices. A classic example comes from an experiment conducted by psychologist Solomon Asch in the 1950s. In this study, participants were asked to match the length of a line on one card to one of 3 lines on another card. It was an easy task, but here's the catch. Most of the participants were actors instructed to give the wrong answer. When it was the real participants' turn to answer, they often went along with the group, even when they knew the answer was wrong. This experiment revealed how powerful the pressure to conform can be, making social proof a potent tool for manipulation. The door-in-the-face technique, too much? How about a little less? Here's a fun one, the door-in-the-face technique. It works by making an outrageous request first, which you fully expect to be rejected, and then following it up with a smaller, more reasonable request. The idea is that after saying no to something big, people are more likely to agree to something smaller out of guilt or a desire to be accommodating. Imagine a teenager asking their parents for permission to stay out until 3 a.m. The parents, of course, say no. Then the teen asks, "How about until midnight?" Suddenly, midnight seems like a much more reasonable compromise, and the parents might agree, without realizing they've been manipulated. The emotional roller coaster, tugging at the heartstrings. Sometimes, manipulation doesn't rely on logic or reason, but instead pulls directly at our emotions. Think about the last time you saw a commercial with sad music and images of mistreated animals, urging you to donate to a charity. This is emotional manipulation in action. By making you feel strong emotions, whether it's guilt, sympathy, or even anger, manipulators can push you toward a certain decision. It's a powerful tactic because emotions often bypass our logical thinking, leading us to act impulsively. Knowledge is power. Now that you know some of the darkest dark manipulation tactics out there, you're better equipped to spot them in the wild. Whether it's a high-pressure sales pitch, a persuasive friend, or even your own internal FOMO, recognizing these techniques can help you take a step back and think critically before making decisions. The next time you find yourself inexplicably craving that soda, pause and ask yourself, is this what I really want, or is someone pulling the strings behind the scenes? After all, the best way to avoid being manipulated is to stay aware and maybe even laugh at how sneaky some of these tactics can be.